In this video, I'm going to be taking all of the turns. Now while Savor the Moment is 3 mana, it isn't the best as we skip our next untap step. This is why today's deck is built around Fires of Invention. Being able to cast multiple spells for free a turn means we can cast a Planeswalker or interactive spell and then follow it up with an extra turn. Also, having access to a lot of mana, we can play Keruga as our companion to make sure we always have access to a lot of cards, as well as alongside Fires of Invention, it's very easy to put into play. As Keruga does have a stipulation that we can only have cards above 3 mana in the deck, we have to play cards like Brazen Borrower and Fire Ice to keep our curve high, but also spells that we can cast on the early turns. This decklist recently did well in an online Modern tournament, which is why my Discord recommended me to play in today's video. To start off the first round, we've got a great opening 6 on the play, and we can start off with a turn 1 Steam Vents. Can you see the really good card in our opening hand here that will win us the game? Yep, that is right, it's Factor, the sponsor of this video. Are you looking for a hassle-free way to eat healthy? Then you need to check out Factor. They deliver fresh, chef-prepared meals right to your door, and there's no more guesswork when it comes to healthy eating. Factor offers 30 dietitian-designed meals each week, with different meal plans for different diets and tastes like Keto, Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and more. Choose from 6 to 18 meals per week depending on your needs, and if you wish to skip a week, no problem. All of Factor's meals are chef-prepared and dietitian-approved. You can be sure you're going to get healthy and also super tasty meals packed with premium science-backed nutritional quality. The best part, there's no prep or mess required. Just heat and eat your meals in minutes. There are also registered dietitians for free provided by Factor that can help with weight management, bulking up, or just revamping your diet. And this is not just limited to the meals. Factor has add-ons like mains, sides, shakes, smoothies, and desserts that are perfect for your diet, so you'll be eating well and snacking deliciously. So why not give Factor a try and take the stress out of healthy living and use this promo code on screen now for a discount, and find my link in the description of this video. Passing back to the opponent though, they just play a Scalding Tarn and pass back. With me hitting my second land drop, they eventually cycle a Curator of Mysteries, which makes me realize we're playing against Living End. Things don't look too good for us though when they cycle another Curator of Mysteries and grief us to take our Days Undoing. Days Undoing is great against Living End because it does shuffle their graveyard back into their library, but also it's great because we have Narset in the deck. While our hand isn't looking great, it gets even worse when the opponent has a second grief to evoke. Now, if they can Living End, they will get back 2 Creator of Mysteries and 2 griefs. So here I can just hope that they're on a disruptive hand and don't have the Living End. And this gets good for me because they actually miss their third land drop and we find a Fire Ice. So now in their upkeep I can tap one of their lands, draw a card, and we manage to find a Fires of Invention. While this is great, the opponent finds the third land. So now we have to hope that they don't have the Living End, but first let's just slam this Fires of Invention and work towards this Time Warp. Not only that, but we have Keruga in the Companion Zone, which next turn if we can have a 5th land, we can play both Time Warp and Keruga to hopefully win the game. With the Fires of Invention resolving, the opponent bounces it with Brazen Borrower. To then make things worse, the opponent plays Shardless Agent, which is gonna get Living End, so I just concede to save me time on this earth. Going into boarding though, we have a great sideboard for this matchup with 4 Leyline of the Void because it's so great with Keruga. And going into the second game, while this opening hand doesn't have a Leyline of the Void, it's very powerful because we have both Narset and Fires of Invention to try and get a combo kill. The game starts off very slow. Actually, nothing really happens until turn 3 because the opponent is just cycling creatures. So on my third turn, I do fetch my basic island and try and cast this Narset Parter of Veils. And with no hesitation, the opponent does have Force of Negation, which they should because they need to stop me from interrupting their cycling. While I am playing blue, I actually have no counterspells available here, but the opponent doesn't know that, so they Living End on their turn so that they can make a massive board. What's great for us here is that not only do we have multiple lands, but we can now play Fires of Invention and Savor the Moment next turn to try and work towards a combo kill, and if we can take multiple turns, then we can even potentially put Keruga into play. With the Chandra Torch of Defiance off the top, it's a great find because that is a removal spell. But first let's play our Fires of Invention and Savor the Moment so that we can take an additional turn. For our additional draw step, we find a Fury, which we can cast for free, not evoked, but actually just for 5 mana. So here now I have 2 removal spells and a 3/3 double strike, so I'm going to play a Chandra, kill a creature, play a Fury, kill a creature, and now the opponent doesn't have great attacks. What's even better for me is the opponent just cycles a card and attacks with only the Striped Riverwinder towards the Chandra Torch of Defiance. So I'm going to snap off this block because not only can we get the Fury back when the opponent casts a Living End, but now we get to keep the Chandra around to draw more cards and find more taking turn spells. And I'm a beast because we find Time Warp off the top of the deck. So I instantly cast it, but the opponent does have a counterspell. So we're just going to put Karuga into play and hope that that can get us there. The 2 cards we drew from Karuga does find us a Fury, but we can't cast that this turn because of the stipulation of Fires of Invention only allowing us to cast 2 spells a turn. With the opponent not doing much, I start off with plussing my Chandra. This finds a Savor the Moment off the top, which I'm obviously going to cast. This can be cast for free because of Fires of Invention. Having to decide between casting Fury and Days Undoing, first I attack with the Karuga, which prompts my opponent to Living End in response. This puts a load of creatures on the board, they get to grief me and take my Fury from hand. Now I can Days Undoing and get a fresh 7 for my next additional turn. This finds a Time Warp, which I'm going to cast, but the opponent unfortunately concedes when I attack with all my creatures. We were going to take so many turns here. But what's insane is that in game 3, not only do we have a Leyline of the Void in our opening hand, but we have a Gemstone Caverns. This means we have 2 free spells on turn 0 to start the game. I do exile Time Warp to the Gemstone Caverns as that is a lot of mana, and with no Fires of Invention it's much harder to cast, so I'd rather hit all of my land drops. And then the stare down begins. Because Leyline of the Void is on the table, the opponent doesn't really want to cycle anything. They do grief away my Savor the Moment, but yeah, for the rest of the game we're kind of doing nothing, and with a Castle Vantress on the board, I can eventually start scrying. So with the opponent here cycling a Striped Riverwinder, I eventually decide that I'm going to cast my Karuga. This is because if the opponent has Mystical Dispute, eventually it is going to counter something because they are so aggressively holding it up, I'm sure I will tap down low eventually. But they don't have it. So here it becomes Karuga and Hall of Storm Giants beatdown plan. The opponent did have Force of Negation for my Narset Parter of Veils, and Mystical Dispute for my Ice, but once they eventually Living Ended and tapped out low, I could land my Fury and have Brazen Borrower up so that I could bounce their Creator of Mysteries and use Hall of Storm Giants to attack them for lethal. Now we didn't really get to take much turns this match, and that's because the opponent had so much interaction. So what happens when you play against a deck with no interaction? Starting off the next round, we have Gemstone Caverns to put into play, getting rid of Savor the Moment when the opponent starts off with the Tron land. Things aren't looking too great here, but I can Brazen Borrower the Chromatic Sphere back to their hand to try and stop them from drawing a card so I can land the Narset and prevent more card draw. The opponent plays another Tron land and replays the Chromatic Sphere, so I slam the Narset. But things aren't looking too good when I actually just whiff on the -2. But what also isn't good is the opponent doesn't sack the Chromatic Sphere. So instantly I'm thinking they need it for the green mana, but then they just play a tower and cast a Wormcoil Engine and another star. So I think it's just a mistake and they don't know how Narset works, because if you had the Chromatic Star, then you don't need to save the Chromatic Sphere for green mana. Anyways, despite that, we find a Savor the Moment and a Fire Ice from the Narset, so I decide to take the Fire Ice to try and mana screw the opponent. Here I'm going to bounce the Wormcoil Engine to their hand and tap the tower to try and prevent them from doing anything. After bouncing the Wormcoil Engine to their hand, they play another land and recast the Wormcoil Engine. Here we are so close to winning. With a Jace the Mind Sculptor in hand, I can play that, bounce the Wormcoil Engine, and pray the opponent has nothing next turn because they can't draw any cards with their Chromatic Sphere or Chromatic Star, and then we could potentially untap and win. So as long as my Jace the Mind Sculptor stays on the table, we have a really good shot at winning this game. Yeah, that's going to be a no for me, Chief. The opponent has a Cityscape Leveler to destroy the Jace the Mind Sculptor, and then now we just don't find anything off the top of the deck. I'll fast forward through it now. We just couldn't find anything impactful or anything that we could cast as well as take extra turns so that we wouldn't die. Very unfortunate game. We are so close to taking a lot of turns. Maybe I messed up somewhere. Going into boarding, we want the Blood Moons and the Mystical Disputes in because the removal spells are so bad, and potentially you can mana leak something with Mystical Dispute, and Blood Moon can just lock them out of the game. And going into game 2, we have a great opening hand because we have a Blood Moon and 2 Mystical Disputes. Blood Moon's going to prevent them from doing anything, Mystical Dispute can disrupt the opponent, and Brazen Borrower can bounce any early artifacts that we know they can't sacrifice. Now the opponent has the play of the century, That's a turn 1 forest because they read my soul and knew I had Blood Moon in my opening hand. Feeling tilted and confused and just questioning life, we're gonna move on with this game. The first impactful play is on turn 4, I get a Fires of Invention down and get to cast my Blood Moon. This not only slows down the opponent, but fixes our mana, and we have to hope to hit a 5th land so that we can slam Karuga next turn to draw a lot of cards. This, however, gets a bit confusing because the opponent uses Karn the Great Creator to get Haywire Might to be able to destroy my Blood Moon. So now I have to play my second Blood Moon and put Karuga on the table to draw a load of cards. Things get a bit scary when the opponent does find Oblivion Stone from their sideboard with Karn the Great Creator and put their Haywire Might on the table. On their end step, they do use the Haywire Might to exile my Fires of Invention, but this now unlocks my Brazen Borrower to be naturally cast so we can bounce the Oblivion Stone to their hand. This also enables Days Undoing, so we can now shuffle away their Oblivion Stone so they won't be able to cast it next turn. With double Blood Moon and an Otawara in hand, I decide to not play my Days Undoing to hold up both Mystical Dispute and the Otawara. I get paid off for this play when the opponent casts a Wormcoil Engine. This allows me to hit the opponent for 5 damage uncontested and play my Fires of Invention, and now we can cast the Days Undoing. This finds not only the Otawara again, but 2 Savor the Moments. This will most likely kill the opponent because we have both Jace and Chandra Torch of Defiance to keep going through our deck to draw more and more taking turn spells. With the opponent spending their turn to get Boseiju from Expedition Map, they do destroy my Fires of Invention. While that is annoying, I do get my second island so I can still cast my Savor the Moments. Now the slight problem is Savor the Moments prevents me from untapping, so this means that the Karuga also won't untap. So on my extra turn, all I get to do is plus the Chandra again to deal them 2 extra damage, but the opponent can't do anything relevant on their turn, so they do eventually die to my Chandra's plussing twice. Winning this game and going into game 3, we have a great opening hand. Again with Gemstone Caverns, we can now play that and exile the Chandra Hope's Beacon from our hand. This can let us fire Ice on our turn 1, and then we can try and work towards a Fires of Invention. Things are a bit scary when the opponent has a turn on Urza's Tower and Expedition Map, but again we're slowing them down with the Fire Ice. They do follow up with the Chromatic Sphere, but like an absolute beast, I find Blood Moon off the top of the deck. There's no question here, we gotta slam this Blood Moon and then work towards Fires of Invention plus Savor the Moment to eventually kill the opponent by taking loads of turns. With the opponent tapping out to get an Expedition Map and a basic forest, I can now play my Fires of Invention and Savor the Moment. Now we're working towards either a Karuga next turn or anything good off the top. And like I am a beast, come on, we're gonna draw another Savor the Moment. This means I can now play my Otawara, play the Savor the Moment, and then Days Undoing again to take an extra turn with a fresh set of 7 cards. And inevitably, that finds us a Time Warp to take another turn, and a Fury will let us have a 3/3 double strike on the board. And now the ball is rolling, with Karuga hitting the table and a Narset part of our Veils coming down, finding us a Jace the Mind Sculptor. I can now attack for 6 and say go, and the opponent is going to struggle to answer everything on this board. They do manage to get an Oblivion Stone down, but they aren't going to have enough time to do anything with it to destroy this board, as well as with multiple Brazen Borrowers, I can keep bouncing it to their hand. Now after activating Narset, finding Days Undoing, this is going to give me 7 cards and the opponent 1, so I was about to bounce the Oblivion Stone to hand and then cast the Days Undoing, but the opponent conceded the game. Overall, I had a ton of fun with this deck, but I did struggle to actually take turns with it as it played out more like a control deck because modern decks are so destructive right now. As always though, for you gambling degenerates, here's the chest and don't forget to like and subscribe.